Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Can all of you hear me? Alhamdulillahi wa kafa. Wa salamun ala ibadihi allazina astafa amma ba'd. A'udhu billahi min ash-shaytanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Last time we started the surah, one of the most beautiful parts of the surah of Surah Al Imran, which is the story of Sayyidina Maryam alayhi salam. The story about Sayyidina Maryam alayhi salam. She was a makbul woman, a remarkable woman of this ummah. She was so makbul to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if we look at her story, how she gets this kubuliyat. So the start of that kubuliyat is her mother. She is the daughter of Sayyidina Imran alayhi salam, himself a prophet of Allah ta'ala, and his wife, whose name is not mentioned here, but other riwayat mention her name to be Hanna, and we can call her to be the wife of Maryam, the mother of Maryam alayhi salam, Maryam. And when Maryam, when she became pregnant, she made this dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That Rabbi inni nazartu laka ma fi batni muharraran fataqabbal minni innaka anta sami'ul alim. That, O Allah, I pledge to you completely the child which is in my womb, and give this child kubuliyat. So the first lesson we get from this whole story is this lesson from Maryam, that we should have a worry about kubuliyat at the very beginning of something, at the very start of something, at the very inception of something. These days, parents, they worry about their kids when they turn 16, 18, 20. Sometimes they don't even worry till they reached mid 25 or 30 or 40. Allahu Akbar. And here Maryam alayhi salam, her baby is not even born yet, and she is presenting it to be accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Her baby is just in her womb, and she is asking for kubuliyat by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then the second lesson that we learned from this story is that when she gave birth to Sayyidina Maryam alayhi salam, wa inni samaituha Maryama, that I've named her Maryam, and then she made a very specific dua, that wa inni u'idhuha bika, that I seek refuge for her in you. And he's making dua to Allah Ta'ala. In other words, that Allah, I seek your protection for her on her behalf. Wa zurriyataha, and for her descendants, yani the descendants of Sayyidina Maryam alayhi salam, her children, her progeny, from who? Minash shaitanir rajim, from shaitan. So in other words, she has this fikr that the number one enemy of insan is a shaitan. And she is pleading to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah save my daughter and whoever her offsprings will be in the future from this enemy called Shaitan. So this is the second lesson, that look at this woman's foresight, that the baby is in her womb and she's making dua for her, and then the baby has just come out and she's already worried about the next generations that are going to come. This is a very big lesson for us. And what is she worried about? She's not worried about money. She's not worried about career. She's not worried about the normal things that we have in the dunya. What she is worried about is protection from Shaitan. Means that she is worried about her child being on deen, and the offsprings of her child, her lineage, her legacy. She is worried about that I want my child and her offsprings to be pious, to be muttaqi, to be righteous, to be makbul, to be beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is what the Muslim Ummah needs today. We need to have parents, both men and women, to have this attribute of the mother of Sayyidina Maryam alayhi salam, Maryam alayhi salam, that she is worried about the deen and taqwa and qubuliyat of their children. They're worried about the deen, taqwa and qubuliyat of the generations to come. So when she presents her daughter to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, makes dua for her acceptance, then the next thing that happens is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran that فَتَقَبَّلَهَا رَبُّهَا بِقَبُولٍ حَسَنٍ, that Allah ta'ala then gave her qubuliyat. Allah ta'ala accepted her dua and made her daughter Sayyidatuna Maryam alayhi salam one of the most makbul, beloved women. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said directly in response to her dua that فَتَقَبَّلَهَا رَبُّهَا, that Allah ta'ala surely accepted Sayyidina Maryam alayhi salam بِقَبُولٍ حَسَنٍ, in the most beautiful and noble of ways. And you imagine when Allah ta'ala is saying these words, what type of qubuliyat would this be? Where Allah ta'ala himself is saying that we accepted her and gave her qubuliyah in the most beautiful ways. And then وَأَنْبَتَهَا نَبَاتًا حَسَنًا, and He raised her up to be the most beautiful model, the paragon of haya, the paragon of modesty. Yani Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made arrangements for her upbringing. Now this is another lesson for all of us, a third lesson, that Allah ta'ala is saying that we raised her, we caused her to grow in the best of ways. And this is showing that what is the way in which your child can have qubuliyat, that your child can be on deen. Yani remember the wish, the dua of her mother, that I want my child to have qubuliyat and my child to be on deen and to be protected from shaitan and her offsprings to be protected from shaitan. How can that wish be fulfilled? For that you need nabata hasana, ambataha nabatan hasana. You need a virtuous upbringing. Like you raise a seedling into a plant and then plant into a tree, you have to do tarbiyah of that plant. You have to take care of that plant. You have to ensure that there are no rot or weeds or insects or some diseases. You have to ensure proper adequate sunlight, water, nutrients, moisture. So you have to take care of that patch of soil. In the same way, that's the example that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is using, that to raise our kids, we need to provide them a virtuous upbringing. You need to do their tarbiyat, their ta'aleem. And this is again giving an ishara, a signal to all the fathers and all the mothers that they also have to take care and make arrangements for a virtuous upbringing. And then what exactly is a virtuous upbringing? What are the important ingredients of good tarbiyat, virtuous upbringing? So next thing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, وَكَفَّلَهَا Zakariya, that we put her in the care of Sayyidina Zakaria alayhi salam, who was a prophet of that time. So when Sayyidina Maryam alayhi salam, she woke up, her father had passed away. She was an orphan. Her father himself was a prophet, a righteous man. And Sayyidina Zakaria alayhi salam was also a prophet, but he was alive. And we see that she was in the care, in the guardianship, in the tarbiyat of Sayyidina Zakaria alayhi salam, who was a Nabi of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the lesson that we learn is that for proper tarbiyat, we need good company. You need to put yourself, your son, your daughter in the care of righteous people. This could also mean that we should have mentors, our ulama, mashayikh, to go to them, to have rabata with them, to have connection with them, to benefit from their nasiha, to benefit from their counsel, to benefit from their du'as, to raise our kids in that mahal, in that environment where they develop a love and affection for the salihin, the sadiqeen, the mashayikh of this ummah, so that when they develop a love for the lovers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then automatically they will develop a love for Allah ta'ala in their heart. This is the nature of kunu ma'as sadiqeen, which is a command for all of us as well, that put yourself in the company of those who are close to Allah, who are true in their relationship with Allah, who love Allah truly and passionately. Put yourself in their company, because their company will have an effect on you. And just like this command holds true for us, it also holds true for tarbiyat. It's a principle of tarbiyat, that we need to provide our kids with such an environment where they benefit from the company of such mashayikh. We should take them to such gatherings where they develop a fondness for such people of Allah. We should ask such righteous and pious scholars in our community, or those whom we know, to make dua for us and the dua for our children, to guide us with their mashwara, with their counsel, with their advice, and to have overall a connection, a rabata, a contact, correspondence with them, to seek guidance from time to time. Because this company, and this is very ajib, that our scholars and mashayikh, they mention that a child, before they become mukallaf, before they become morally responsible for the ahkam of the sharia, they're masoom, they're innocent. And since they're innocent, so they cannot sin, because sin happens when a person becomes morally responsible, when they reach the age of puberty and beyond. So a child, they cannot sin. And when they cannot sin, then there is no darkness of sin in their heart. There is no zulmat. There is no corruption in their heart. There's no blackness in their heart. They have a very pure fitrat, pure human nature, purity within them, purity in their heart. They have nur in their heart. Just they're born on fitrah, like a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, that every child is born on fitrah, and then it's their parents who can make them one way or the other. If they do proper tarbiyah, then that child can grow up into a pious ummati of the Prophet ﷺ. And if that tarbiyat and environment is not given, then the child can go the other path. It's the parents who provide that environment. But the child himself or herself is pure from inside. And that's why when we bring such our kids and we put them in good company, we take them to our mashaykh, request du'as for them, their barakah of the company of our mashaykh has a tremendous effect, a remarkable effect on our children. Because we may not be able to benefit so much from their company because we have sins and good deeds in our heart. We have some zulmat because of our sins. We may not be able to absorb that nur which is coming from the barakah of the salihin and siddiqeen. But our kids, our children, because of the purity in their nature, they can absorb that nur very quickly. They can absorb that nur much more than we can. And I remember once in one of the talks, our Shaykh, he was explaining that sometimes when kids 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, or even younger than that, 3 years, they are able to absorb so much nur. They're able to take in so much barakat and blessings and anwarat that an ordinary person will not be able to take. When the same child, when he grows up, will not be able to take so much nur. Because when they grow up, there will be naturally, human ends up sinning. But this is the age when they can benefit tremendously. And that's why there are cases in our ummah of how there were kids who would attain the nur of wilayat, who would attain this nur of wilayat, this companionship, this qubuliyat in the Allah, while they were still a child. And if they hadn't attained the age of puberty, they weren't mukallaf yet, but that attained that nur of wilayat, that nur of this deep nisbat and connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They got that nemat in the batin while they were young. And the reason why they got this was because of this upbringing, because of being part of that environment where they could benefit from the company of the mashayikh, the salihin, the siddiqeen. So we should try to learn this lesson, and these sadiqeen, siddiqeen, the muttaqeen, the awliya of this ummah, they will never end. They will always remain, they're there right now, and they will always remain till the very end, till Yawm al-Qiyamah. And the reason is because just like Allah Ta'ala wants us to attain taqwa, and the way to attain taqwa is by putting ourselves in the company of the ahli taqwa, the people of taqwa. This means that the people of taqwa will remain till the very end. Attaining taqwa is a hukum which is till the very end. So the people of taqwa, the people of wilaya, the ahlullah, the people of Allah, who have a deep nisbat and connection with Allah and love for Allah, such people will exist, will continue to exist till the very end. They might be few, they might not be in our city, they might be in some other country, but they do exist. And it's our responsibility as parents. So number one, that we try to benefit from the company of the Ahlullah. And then a second responsibility is to ensure that our kids, our children also are given that exposure, and that muhabbat of Ahlullah is developed and nurtured within their hearts as well, and can easily be nurtured because of their innate purity. And the benefit will be tremendous. The nur, it's like a vacuum. They can suck in that nur, the company of the Ahlullah and Mashayikh, the way the children can take nur from such company, it's like a vacuum. They can suck in, they can take in all that barakat and anwarat in their hearts and can attain that nur of wilayat and taqwa even at that age. Hazrat Shaykh Ahmad Sirindi Rahmatullah, Allah Ta'ala blessed him with a son, and his name was Hazrat Khwaja Muhammad Masoom Rahmatullah. And he named him Masoom because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inspired his heart that we will be sending you as child who will never commit gunah kabira, a major sin in his life. That's why he was named Masoom. And in his childhood, Hazrat Khwaja Muhammad Masoom Rahmatullah, he attained this nur of wilayat, this nur of nisbat, this deep connection and love with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there are countless such stories in our ummah. So we understand from this the importance of good company, and especially not just good company, the company of Ahlullah. And this forms a very important ingredient of the tarbiyah of our kids. Now what happens is that Sayyidina Zakaria alayhi salam, he is the caretaker of Sayyidina Maryam alayhi salam. And Sayyidina Maryam alayhi salam, even though she was a girl, Allah Ta'ala accepted her for this incredible honor, which was to be the khadima of Baytul Muqaddas. She became an abida and a khadima. These were her two identities. People talk about my identity. I'm a Pakistani or an American, or I'm a chartered accountant. The two dominant identities of Sayyidina Maryam alayhi salam, and this is going to become important for the next thing which Allah Ta'ala is going to mention, was that she was an abida. She had secluded herself in that chamber in Baytul Muqaddas, where she would engage in ibadat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, worshipping Allah, devoted to Allah. So this is ruju ilallah, where her gaze was cut off from makhluk and it was fixed at her malik, at her creator, at her khalik. And from this we understand and we can learn another lesson, that there should be some part of our day, part of our night, where we can also worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in seclusion, in khalwat. Worshipping Allah Ta'ala in khalwat has been the way of all the siddiqeen and salihin of this ummah. Technically, Sayyidina Maryam alayhi salam is before the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But if you go back, the Anbiya alayhi salam, even non-prophetic human beings who were maqbool, you will see this feature in their life. That no matter how busy they are during the day, how much responsibility and the responsibility of deen that they have on their shoulder, of propagating the message of Islam, da'wah, ta'aleem, jihad, so many other responsibilities. But you will see this one thing, that they would take time out to worship Allah Ta'ala in seclusion, in khalwat. Our mashayikh, they explain that a person is recognized by the ibadat that they do in their khalwat. There are two words, khalwat and jalwat. Khalwat refers to solitude. The ibadat that we do in our solitude, that's the mark of wilayat. In public, everyone acts in a religious manner. You go to the masjid, you pray because that environment is very conducive. Everyone is praying, you also want to pray. When people are around you, then it's very difficult for us to sin. Very difficult for us to sin when you have people around you in your room or in the lounge or in the drawing room. So when there are people around us, when it's something which is public, when we know that other people can look at us, then naturally a person refrains from sin and they want to do more and more good deeds. It's easier to act in a religious and a pious way. The real test comes when a person is all alone, in khalwat, in seclusion. Now what does a person do? Many times a person slips. Many times they fall into vulgar sins. And this is very dangerous because there is a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ said that a person who outwardly in publicly acts in a pious manner, but when he is all alone he commits sins, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not need the worship and ibadat of that person. There will be cases that a person will come to Yawm al-Qiyamah with heaps and mountains of good deeds, and then all of those good deeds will be turned into dust, and will be said to him that this is because you did not have azmat for the hukum of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You used to commit these vulgar sins in private. So to have our batin, to have our khalwat, our private, when we are all alone, that is the time when we should be very vigilant about ourselves, to save ourselves from sins and to attach ourselves to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we see this worshipping Allah ta'ala in solitude, in seclusion for some time. This was also the sunnah of Nabi alayhi salatu wassalam. Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, in one of the hadiths in Sahih Bukhari Sharif, she mentions that the revelation, when they began on the Prophet ﷺ, initially they began in the form of true dreams. Whatever the Prophet ﷺ used to see during the night in a dream, the next day it used to happen. And then that hadith mentions that hubbiba ilayhil khala, that seclusion, solitude, any khalwat was made beloved to me, was made beloved to the Prophet ﷺ. And as a result of that, the Prophet ﷺ used to go to cave Hira, Mount Hira. There was a cave there, Ghar Hira. And there he used to sometimes seclude himself for one day, for a portion of the day, sometimes more than a day, sometimes a week, and take with him some provision, some food. And in that cave, the Prophet ﷺ used to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, do tafakkur, fikr, reflection. And this was with no interruption. This was with no one else in that gathering, in that place. And this is teaching us a lesson, that doing ibadat in khalwat was the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. And the first revelation that came upon Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam came in that halat, when Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam was in khalwa, engaged in ibadah. Technically speaking, or logically speaking, the first revelation could have come on the streets of Makkah Mukarramah, in Baytullah Sharif. It was Baytullah, house of Allah Ta'ala. It could have come in the Hujra of the Prophet ﷺ. And back then, 1400 years ago, Makkah Mukarramah was, you don't have these big rise and high-rise buildings that you have today. It was very barren. There weren't many people. You delete all the Saudi construction, it was a very barren area. So still the Prophet ﷺ felt the need to disconnect from that society. And this is the lesson, a deeper lesson, that every now and then a person, they should try to disconnect from the mundane, disconnect from the ordinary, disconnect from their daily routine. Even if it means that you have to leave a place where you're accustomed to and then go and spend some time, some days, trying to disconnect from that ordinary, mundane, the dunya, in order to connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because in order to connect to Khaliq, we have to disconnect ourselves from makhluk. There has to be a prior disconnect in order to connect. And here as well, and in the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ as well, there was a disconnect first, and that's when the revelation came. So this is teaching us a lesson, that perhaps when a person spends time in ibadah, in khalwa, that attracts the special mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that special attention from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because of which then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can bestow a person with the nabuwat in the case of the Prophet sallallahu, or can bestow wilayat in the case of Sayyidina Maryam alayhi salatu wasalam. Nabuwat has ended, but the silsila of wilayat still continues. So if we can also take some time out during the day, we don't need to go to any cave. For us, we need to be where we are. But the lesson, the general lesson is to disconnect. We are so plugged in into our daily routine, and for some time during the day, we should just empty ourselves of all dunya, of all thoughts of dunya, all worries and fikr and concerns about the dunya. This dunya is temporary, will end. And we should then try to connect with our heart to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That Allah, you are al-Baqi. All of this is fani. And we should even forget about akhirah. Forget about dunya, akhirah. Try to focus on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Forget about Jannat as well. Jannat, Jahannam. That I want the creator of Jannat. I want to establish a taluk with Allah ta'ala. Rabbul Kaaba, the Khalik, my creator. That is only possible when a person first tries to sit in some area where they're less distracted, and then they can focus in on their heart and use their heart to remember Allah. This is a practice that elsewhere Allah Ta'ala mentions, that wazkur isma rabbik, that remember the name of your Lord, وَتَبَتَّلْ إِلَيْهِ تَبَتِيلًا. Remember the name of your Lord exclusively and to the exclusion of everything else. And you just dive deep into the remembrance of Allah. Try to lose yourself in the remembrance and the zikr of Allah. Become forgetful of everything else, and concentrate and become attentive towards the zikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is a practice that we should do for some time every day. So Sayyidina Maryam alayhi salam, she was an abida, and second, she was a khadima. Khadima comes from khidma. She would serve, service, khidmat. And this is again teaching another important lesson about good parenting. Good parenting means that we should raise our kids in such a way that we inculcate, number one, this shock and desire for ibadat within our kids. And within ibadat, the number one ibadat is salah. So we should ensure that they pray their salah on time. This is one principle we should never compromise on. So no matter what happens in our life, in their life, in the life around, in the dunya, right? Whatever happens around us, any world event, salah should be a pillar in their life, in our life, in their life. That salah cannot be qaza, no matter what happens. So that's ibadah, the topmost, foremost ibadah. And then second attribute we should try to inculcate within ourselves and also within our kids is to develop this shauq for khidmat. They take delight in serving other people. This has a lot of barakah. Number one, that those who serve other people, by nature, they can rid themselves of such diseases like takabbur, arrogance. Allah Ta'ala saves them. Their heart has humility. Their heart develops this natural humility because they're serving others. They love to serve others. So Allah Ta'ala gives them this humility in their heart, and Allah Ta'ala protects their heart from all these crippling diseases, these atomic diseases like arrogance, takabbur, ujub, this being self-centered, kibr, And the second fayda and benefit of this is that when a person develops and acquires humility, then man tawaza'a lillah rafa'ahullah. Whoever humbles themselves for the sake of Allah, Allah Ta'ala raises that person up. Raises that person up. Allah Ta'ala will give honor and izzat because of this ajazi and humility. So in khidmat itself is serving other people. Khairun nas may yanfa'un nas. This is one of the other tragedies of our time, that we have lost the spirit of khidmat. We have lost the spirit of becoming an khadim. Khadim. Today people want to become, today people want that other people should do our khidmat. Other people should serve me. That's the mizaj, unfortunately, of many of us. That we want to be in a position of authority, we want to get some position of respect, some status, so that other people will respect us and so that other people will serve us and assist us and do our task and do several things for us. So that's unfortunately the mizaj. The mizaj of the deen is the complete opposite. Our deen and the teachings of the Prophet ﷺ and the sunnat is that you go out and help other people. And again, we see this in the sunnah of Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam before Nabuwat. These are attributes which were there in the Prophet ﷺ before receiving the first revelation. Amma Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha, she mentions about the Prophet ﷺ that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will never waste you, will never put you in any harm's way. This is when the first revelation came, when the Prophet ﷺ was fearful about himself, whether he would be able to carry this weight of revelation on his shoulder or not. And Amma Khadija radiallahu ta'ala, she's consoling the Prophet ﷺ and saying these words of affection and sympathy, that don't be worried. Allah will never waste you. Allah is with you. And the reason why Allah Ta'ala is with you is because you join ties with your relative. You help those who need help. Those who are not able to earn on their own, you make arrangements for their earning and for their living. For those who are burdened by some task, you go out of the way to help them and relieve their burden. You honor the guests and you help and assist those وَتُعِينُ عَلَى نَوَائِبِ الْحَقِّ, those who are fighting in the cause of haqq, in the cause of truth. And while fighting in the cause of truth, there's some musibat, there are difficulties in their life, that they're facing obstacles in the path of truth. You go and help them and remove those obstacles in their life. All of these attributes are about khidmat, helping other people. And these were the foundational attributes of the Prophet ﷺ before becoming a Nabi, before the manifestation of Nabuwat, which again is teaching us another important lesson, that perhaps khidmat of other people is such a beloved quality to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the sight of Allah, that whoever has this quality in them, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bless them with the nobility and Allah ta'ala will use them for some work of deen. So anyone who wishes to do work of deen, be a da'i or invite other people, it's very important that we develop this sifat inside of us to have humility and this passion for helping other people, not because we want some name. One of our mashaykh used to say that when you get some position of honor and respect, then it happens, many times it happens that other people become envious of your position. They start to do hasad. You have hasideen, people who are envy, jealous, and the number of hasideen increases. The greater your rank, whether it's the dunya or the deen, the greater your rank that you have, your hasideen, people who oppose you, your mukhalifin, will increase. And then he would say that, can I tell you of one such position where if you get this position, then you will have no hasideen and you will also have a maqam in the sight of Allah. And said that position is that you become a khadim. Khadim of everyone. Because khadim by nature is something which other people don't aspire to be. They don't aspire to become a khadim. What's so remarkable about khadim? You're doing khidmat of others. Right? So this is a position which is free from envy, from hasad. And it has a maqam in the sight of Allah. Allah Ta'ala holds this amal very dearly. It's loved by Allah Ta'ala. Khairun nas mayyan fa'un nas. The most beloved and the best of people are those who help others. So we should develop this mindset that we have to help others. My goal, my living, the purpose of my living is to help other people. Our Hazrat Maulana Lahori Ghaliban, Hazrat Maulana Lahori Rahmatullah alayh, one of his sayings, beautiful saying, he said that I can give you the summary of the entire deen of Islam in 3 sentences. The entirety of deen can be summed up in 3 sentences. That please Allah by worshipping Allah, please the Prophet ﷺ by ittiba, following the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and please makhluk of Allah by serving and doing khidmat of them. 3 things. That you worship Allah, ita'at of Allah, ittiba of the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and khidmat of the makhluk of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with the intention that this makhluk of Allah is also ayalullah. Like in hadith, Allah says that these are my family. This is my Allah Ta'ala's extended family. Ayalullah, the khandan of Allah. And whoever does khair with my ayal, then Allah Ta'ala also does khair with them. If you show mercy on those who are on the face of the earth, Allah will show mercy upon you. So khidmat. So these 2 things are very important, that salah, in our kids doing their tarbiyah, that they don't miss their salah, and they develop a passion for helping others, serving others, and this is something which can be done. It requires this fikr and concern, but there are so many opportunities. Sometimes in one day you have guests over your place, so you teach your kids that you should serve them water, serve them some drink. You teach them the adab of how to host. You teach them certain adab and etiquettes, that you should help other people. You should share your toys with other people. If you have one thing, then you should allow other people to eat from that as well. Teaching these adab and etiquettes of sharing, caring for others, helping others, serving others, so that arrogance goes away, that ujub goes away, and this compassion and empathy for others, these attributes are developed within them at this young age. So Sayyidina Maryam alayhi salam, khidmat, she was a khadima. And now what happened is that once Sayyidina Zakaria alayhi salam, he, being her guardian, was responsible for providing for her. And one day he became late in returning back to her. And when he came in that place, that mihrab where she used to worship, he found that she had with her rizq, provisions. وَجَدَ عِنْدَهَا رِزْقًا, that she had fruits and provisions of all kinds, and she even had off-season fruits. So Sayyidina Zakaria alayhi salam, he became surprised. He said, "Qala Maryamu anna laki hada." That, "Oh Maryam, that where are you getting these fruits from?" And she said that, "Huwa min indillah," that I'm getting them from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This was a very innocent, sweet reply, that this is coming from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This was her iman. This is what happens when a person does zikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ibadat of Allah in khalwat. where their eyes are now cut away, cut off from asbab, worldly means. Normally you get food through worldly means, but when a person fixes their gaze on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah ta'ala is that being who can give us our rizq through worldly means and also bila asbab, without the worldly means. This is displaying her yaqeen, her certainty in the zat of Allah ta'ala, that Allah ta'ala provides me with these fruits which are out of season, and this is inna Allah yarzuqu man yasha. Allah ta'ala can give a rizq to whoever He wills, bighayri hisab, without any accountability. This is all in the qudrat, in the power of Allah ta'ala. And she said this because of her yaqeen. And she had yaqeen because of that ibadah that she was doing in khalwat. Where when you do ibadat in khalwat, then your gaze is cut off from makhluk, and your gaze is fixed on a khaliq. This is the power and the benefit of zikr. That's why zikr is so important. That's why Allah Ta'ala emphasizes zikr in the Quran. Uzkurullah dhikran kasira. That Allah Ta'ala recognizes that we would be living during the day and we will be looking at the people around us and our job and so many things, and if I do this, then this will happen, and if I do that, then that will happen. But all of these things, even though we are living in Darul Asbab, a place of worldly means where we're supposed to acquire these worldly means, that if you're thirsty, you should go and get water and drink water. But at the end of the day, that this is Darul Asbab, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Musabbibul Asbab. Behind all these worldly causes is the Zat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is the being of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah ta'ala is controlling the show. Everything is in the qudrat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These asbab in and in themselves, they have no qudrat. If I think, and sometimes this happens, that my job at university is providing me with the money, and that money is giving me the risk through which I can run my house. So a person begins to think like that: it's my job, my university, my work, my career. That is what is going to help me and provide for me and my family. My job is not my raziq. My factory job is not my raziq. My salary is not my raziq. Our raziq is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is our iman. This is a very important lesson, a lesson of iman. And unfortunately, in our times, because of materialism, the culture is such that we tend to focus so much on the asbab that we begin to think that this is it. My job is everything. If I lose my job, then that's the end. There's no other route for me. We forget that the being who is responsible for our rizq is not my boss, is not my employer, is not these worldly asbab, it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is ar-Razzaq. This is our aqidah, this should be our iman. That our gaze should be fixed on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provides for me. Yes, I'm supposed to make use of these worldly means because that's the hukum of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But these worldly means in and of themselves don't have any qudrat and power to provide for me, to take care of me. It's only when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives them that efficacy that they become effective, and Allah ta'ala uses them as a means to provide for me. But it's Allah ta'ala who's giving me rizq. Allah ta'ala can give me rizq through my factory, through my university, through my degree, through my education, through my career. Allah ta'ala can give rizq to me in any way that He wants. But the rizq will be given to me by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Inna Allaha yarzuqu man yasha. And when Allah ta'ala gives the rizq, the second part of my aqidah, first part is that Allah ta'ala is ar-Razzaq. He is the giver of provision. And rizq, by the way, here doesn't just mean our money and the food and the food that we eat or the clothing that we wear. Rizq here means worldly as well as spiritual rizq. How much taqwa will I get? How much haya can I get? How much ilm-e-deen? How much sabr and shukr? This is also provision, spiritual provision. This is also given to me by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the giver is Allah. This is our iman. And Allah Ta'ala is that being who can give بغير حساب. Yani rizq wasi'a. Allah Ta'ala will give wusat, expansive risk. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give risk from those avenues, those places where a person cannot even think of. بغير حساب includes this, has this meaning. Giving us risk from areas where a person cannot even dream of. And بغير حساب means بغير any mushakkat, without any mushakkat and undue difficulty or hardship, Allah Ta'ala can provide a risk with ease as well. بغير حساب includes all three shades of meaning. And that is part of our aqidah, part of our iman, and this should become part of our yaqeen as well. And for making this yaqeen, all of us have iman that Allah is my razik, but we don't have that yaqeen. To develop this yaqeen, we need to do ibadah. Ibadah especially in khalwa, zikr of Allah Ta'ala. And then we can see the samarat, the fruits of that yaqeen. Allah Ta'ala will make us see that. Make us see those fruits with our own eyes. So these miracles happened, and I mentioned this before as well, that Sayyidina Maryam alayhi salam, she was a non-Nabi. She was a non-Nabi. And even today, these miracles, such karamat can happen. That if a person's yaqeen on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is strong, then Allah ta'ala can provide. Allah ta'ala can provide them with rizq wasi'a, with rizq which is بغير hisab. Now what happens is that when she gave this reply, so this affected Sayyidina Zakaria alayhi salam so much that he turned to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and he made this dua, a famous dua, Hunalika, that when Sayyidina Zakaria alayhi salam, he saw that, he realized that the one who has the power to give Sayyidina Maryam alayhi salam these fruits which are off season, that same being also has the power to give me a child in this old age. So then Sayyidina Zakaria alayhi salam, he called upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Da'a Zakaria. He made dua to Zakaria alayhi salam. So he made dua. Da'a Zakaria Rabbahu. He made dua to his Rabb, to his Lord. So after seeing this extraordinary spectacle, this karamat of a wali of Allah, a Nabi of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is now turning to Allah ta'ala and making dua to Allah ta'ala and asking Allah ta'ala to bless him with the mu'jiza, with the miracle. And what is the dua that he makes? Qala, he said, these are the words of the dua of Sayyidina Zakaria alayhi salam. Rabbi habli min ladunka zurriyatan tayyiba. That, oh my Lord, my Rabb, grant me hiba, gift me. This word hab means hiba or hab. Hiba comes from the root letter hiba. Hiba means a gift, which means that there is no price or compensation that you're paying for it. You get it for free. If I go to the market and buy something, that's an exchange, that I pay the money and I get the product. Hiba is that I don't pay anything and someone just gifts me with something. So habali, Allah gift me min ladunka, from yourself, from your own self, from your own rahmah. Yani not because of any amal that I have done, not because of any ibadah that I have done, not because of anything that I can offer to you. Just Allah, I'm asking you that you give me min ladunka, from your own rahmat, from your own self, from you yourself. Zurriyatan tayyiba, a noble offspring, a noble child, an upright child. So this is also a dua that again women and men both can make. It's a dua that men and women who are not fertile they can make, or men and women who are having any difficulty of any way in conceiving, they can make this dua. Innaka sami'ud dua. That indeed, O Allah, you are the being who listens to all the prayers. So, Sayyidina Zakaria alayhi salam, he is standing there in the chamber and he is making this dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As he is making this dua, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepts this dua. And fanadathul malaikatu. So the angels they called him وَهُوَ قَائِمٌ يُصَلِّي فِي الْمِحْرَابِ. In that particular state while he was standing there in salah, in prayer, in the chamber. Right? So he's standing, he's making dua in that chamber. So what happens now here, this is in response to the dua. That the angels, they now call Sayyidina Zakaria alayhi salam in that situation where again he is praying in salah in the mihrab, and again mihrab was this place of worship. And what do the angels they say in response? That annallaha yubashiruka bi Yahya. That indeed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you the good news of Yahya. Yahya alayhi salam. And Allah ta'ala gives you the good news that you are going to have a son. And his name is Yahya alayhi salam. And not only this, musaddikam bi kalimatin. He is going to confirm a word from Allah. He is going to be a Nabi. Now before we move ahead, this ayat and this whole story and this particular part of the story has several lessons for us. Where Sayyidina Zakaria alayhi salam, he is seeing Sayyidina Maryam alayhi salam that she is getting these fruits which are off season, and he asks her that, Maryam, where are you getting these fruits from? The Mufassirin have written an important nukta pointer here, that Maryam alayhi salam, she is not a Nabi, but Sayyidina Zakaria alayhi salam is a Nabi. And still Sayyidina Zakaria alayhi salam is asking this question, that Maryam, where are you getting these fruits from? And she is saying that min indillah, I'm getting this from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And even though Sayyidina Zakaria alayhi salam, he knows that the giver of rizq is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then he uses this moment to make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The point here is, the lesson here is that Sayyidina Maryam alayhi salam, if you remember, she is worshipping Allah ta'ala in her chamber. She is not exposed to the outer world, outside the chamber. So naturally when she is worshipping Allah inside, her tawajjuh is towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and as a result, her yaqeen, her strength of iman, her strength of yaqeen, it's completely fixated and focused on Allah and Allah alone. There's nothing outward that she's thinking about. No outward responsibilities that she has on her shoulder. Just exclusive remembrance of Allah, where she can dive deep into that remembrance and just forget about everything else around and outside of her. Meanwhile, Sayyidina Zakaria alayhi salam has this responsibility, that being a Nabi of Allah, to give da'wah to the people, to the community, to invite people towards Islam, towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Sayyidina Zakaria alayhi salam, because of the responsibility, he has to go out and he has to engage people. He has to share with people. He has to interact with people. In other words, he has to interact with the makhluk, with the dunya. And when a person interacts with the dunya, when you put yourself in the dunya, then naturally you may not be able to have that same level, of exclusive remembrance of Allah that Sayyidina Maryam alayhi salam she had while she was worshipping Allah in that mihrab. So as a result of that, Sayyidina Zakaria alayhi salam, he is outward, he is looking outside, and because of that, initially this strikes him as strange. But then this realization comes that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has the qudrat, that Allah ta'ala can give these fruits even out of season. So then Sayyidina Zakaria alayhi salam, he uses this moment to make a dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So one thing is that the environment always has an effect. Even if it's a person like a Nabi of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but when you have to interact in an environment where you're always engaged with people, sometimes a person might be thinking at the level of sabab, even though their aqidah is that Allah can operate without sabab. But naturally, when you have to interact in that worldly environment, that has an impact, that has an effect on a person. And in the company that you keep, the company will have an effect, no matter who you are. Whether it's a Nabi of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or a non-Nabi, the company will affect us. And that's why, again, that same point that I mentioned, that it's important that we interact with the dunya so much that we should not allow us the dunya to impact us all the time. There should be some moments in our day where we try to do a detox on our heart and remove the effects of dunya from our hearts. Remove that, wipe away that gaze away from the dunya, and then fix our gaze towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That Allah is the giver, Allah is my khaliq, Allah is the creator. And have that taluk, one-on-one, personal, direct taluk with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To have that moment, give space to that taluk, space to our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The second lesson is that Sayyidina Zakaria alayhi salam, he made a dua to Allah ta'ala at that time. And he made a dua which was according to that situation. And as a result of that, immediately this basharat and good news came that we have accepted your dua. And you look at the dua that, oh Allah, that if you can give Sayyidina Maryam alayhi salam these fruits which are out of season, then you can also give me a particular fruit which is out of season, and that is that I'm old age and I'm beyond that age where I can have a child. In some riwayat, it's mentioned that Sayyidina Zakaria alayhi salam was above 150. And my wife is also beyond that age when she can have a child. Riwayat mentioned that she was about 80 or 90 years old. So both of us, we are beyond such an age where we can, medically speaking or scientifically speaking, we can have a child. But you can, Allah, give Maryam alayhi salam fruits which are out of season. You can also give us a fruit which is out of season. You can give us this child in our old age. So he made this dua according to the situation that he was in. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepted this dua immediately. So the lesson that we learn from this is that if you make dua, and if you're making dua according to the mawqa, the munasabat, the place or the situation that you are in, then that dua has a greater chance of being accepted very quickly in the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Our duas will be accepted by Allah, one way or the other, because this is the shan of a mu'min, that the duas will be accepted. Either you will get whatever you want, manu'an, or Allah Ta'ala will remove some disaster or affliction or calamity from you as a result and a barakah of that dua, or Allah will store that dua and give you the kubuliyat of that dua, the reward of that dua in akhirah. But in this dunya, if a person wishes that I want that dua to be accepted readily and quickly, the lesson that we're learning here is that make dua according to the situation. Make dua according to the situation that you're in. So this can apply to many of us in different ways and because of our different circumstances. These days, it's the time for Hajj. And I'll give you one example, right? In Hajj, all over in Makkah Mukarramah, Madinah Tayyibah, people are coming and within a few days the the rituals and the arkan of Hajj will begin. And as we speak, there are so many people already there, and all of them would have gone there with a lot of passion. They're there with a lot of fervor and feeling, and doing these ibadat, calling Allah, doing sajda before Baytullah Sharif, and we have Maqam Ibrahim and Hajr Aswad and Multazim and Babe Kaaba and then the Rawza of the Prophet Sallallahu. So we are here, we are not able to go. But what we can do is that we can use this event of Hajj and what is happening in Makkah Mukarramah at this time and use that as a way to make dua. So for example, we can say to Allah that, Ya Allah, this is a time when all the lovers, your lovers have assembled in Makkah Mukarramah at your house, at this place, at this assembly of love. And Allah, these people, they are gathered there, they're the ushak, your lovers. Some of them are doing sajda before you. Some of them are doing tawaf around your Khane Kaaba. Some of them are drinking from the well of Zamzam. Some of them are walking between doing sa'i between Safa and Marwa. And Allah, these are all your lovers. It's a group, it's a community of your lovers who are doing these acts of love in this place of love for your love. And Ya Allah, I'm not there physically, but my heart is with them. I'm here in my own home, in my own city, in my own country. But Ya Allah, I ask you that just like you are adorning their hearts with the nur of Iman, with the nur of Yaqeen, with the nur of your Muhabbat, Allah, I ask you that you adorn my heart with that same nur as well. Allah, just like that you're beautifying their hearts with your Muhabbat and your Ma'rifat. Allah, I ask you that you beautify my heart as well with that same Muhabbat and Ma'rifat. Allah, just like that you're washing their hearts of their filth, of their sins, of all the misdeeds that they have done. Allah, I ask you that you wash away the filth from my hearts as well. So this is one of the most important du'as that we can make at this time. That it's a dua that you're making according to the mawqa, the munasabat of the time that you're in. Tapping into the power of Hajj to make a dua which is munasib, appropriate to that situation. Such a dua has a greater chance of kubuliyah, to be readily accepted in the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is something, the doors are open for all of us, and depending on our personal circumstances, we can and we should make dua to Allah Ta'ala. This also is giving us another lesson that a person should make dua. This is an adab of making dua. And this ayat is teaching us that the adab of making dua is that you should never stop making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You should never think like this, that I've made this dua once and twice and thrice and I didn't get what I wanted, so now I shouldn't make dua. You stop making dua. That should never be the case. Why? Because when a person makes dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, those duas will be accepted by Allah. In Quran, Allah Ta'ala promises that ud'uni astajib lakum, make dua to me, I will surely accept your dua. And sometimes here shaitan, he puts this waswasa, the Quran is saying that make dua, I will accept, but I have been making these duas and my duas haven't been accepted up till now. So what is the reason behind the fact that my duas are not accepted? So one reason is that sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not accept our duas immediately, very quickly. Why? Because Allah Ta'ala wants to test us. Allah Ta'ala wants to see whether we are true believers or untrue believers, whether we are strong believers or weak believers. A strong believer is that person who makes dua, then makes dua for 1 day, for 3 days, for 7 days, for 1 month, for a year, for several years, continues to make dua, never leaves the door of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And on the other hand, a weak believer is that who makes dua for a day or two, and then when he doesn't get what he wants, he leaves the door of Allah. He says that Allah does not listen to me. Allah is saying here that innaka sami'ud dua, that Allah indeed listens to your duas. So we should try to be a strong believer. Continue to hold on to this door of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and continue to make this dua to Allah ta'ala. One day this door will open. One day the rahmat of Allah ta'ala will become attentive upon us, towards us. And when this rahmat, this door of mercy will open, we will get what we want. This is the example here. Imagine Sayyidina Zakaria alayhi salam, for how many years would he have been making this dua to Allah ta'ala for a child, for a son? And he must have been elsewhere in the Quran. We will see that his hair became white. And his wife, like I said, is of that age where she cannot bear children. So both of them must have been making this dua for several years now. It's not that they made this dua for 1 day, 2 day, 1 month, 1 year. They must have been making this dua for several years. Now that both of them are in old age, their hair has become white. So for so many years, they must have been making this dua. This is istiqamat, consistently making dua to Allah. And then finally, now in their old age, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving them this good news that anna Allah yubashiruka bi Yahya, that we have accepted your dua. Yani, the lesson is that sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wishes to see how strong we are in our iman. This is an imtihan, a test. If this test can come on a Nabi of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then surely these tests can also come upon us. And we should not despair, and we should not leave the door of Allah, and we should not start complaining that Allah doesn't listen to me. Rather, the taqaza, the requirements of strong iman are that we should hold on firmly to this door and continue to make dua to Allah, have istiqamat, consistently making dua to Allah. The example is like a child. When he wants something from his mother and she refuses to give it to him, so the child doesn't hold back. He insists that I want this. The mother refuses. Still he's insistent that I want this. I want this. He starts to cry. He starts to cry, and then tears come from his eyes, and eventually the mother, she gives in. Amma Aisha Siddiqa radiyallahu ta'ala anha, she mentions that the Prophet ﷺ said that the example of a believer is also similar. That a person, he is making dua to Allah in such a state that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is unhappy, displeased with that person, angry with that person. But the person doesn't stop making dua, continues rather to make dua to Allah ta'ala. And still Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is displeased, angry with that person. But this person doesn't leave the door of Allah, continues onwards to make dua until a time when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then addresses the angels and says that this person has decided that he will not turn to anyone besides me. It seems that he will continue to ask me for this, and he will ask me and me alone for this thing that he wants. And he will not turn to anyone apart from me. So, O my angels, I make you witness that I was displeased with him. Now I've become pleased and razi with him. And whatever he is asking from me, I will grant that very same thing to him. Allahu Akbar Kabira. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was displeased with him, angry with him. And his whole amal is that he is only making dua to Allah and consistently making dua. But this consistency was so beloved to Allah that Allah Ta'ala not only gave that particular thing that he is asking, Allah Ta'ala also becomes razi, pleased with this individual. Those who have any other door to go to, they can turn away from this door of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But for us, we don't have any other door to go to. We only have this door, which is the door of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we have to attach ourselves to this door of Allah. In the books, it's mentioned that there was a pious person, Every year he used to go for Hajj. Once he went with his helper, some khadim. Now, when both of them were in the plains of Arafah and they were reciting Talbiyah, Labbaik, Allahumma Labbaik, so a voice came from above, La Labbaik Laka, that your Labbaik has not been accepted. Again, that old man, that pious man was saying, Labbaik, Allahumma Labbaik. Again, a voice came, La Labbaik Lak, that your Labbaik is not accepted. So that Khadim, he said that, Hazrat, that when your labbaik is not accepted, then why are you continually reciting labbaik, Allahumma labbaik? Why are you saying this? So the Hazrat said that, look, that this is the first time that you're hearing this. I have been coming here for Hajj for the last 30 years, and every single time when I come and I make this labbaik, Allahumma labbaik, I listen to this reply from above that la labbaik, that your labbaik has not been accepted. So again, that person has that, Hazrat, that if your labbaik is not accepted, then, and for every year this has been happening, then why do you come? So then Hazrat said that, tell me that who should I go to? I just have this one door before me, and this is the door which I have to come to. I will come and do what I have to do. I will say labbaik, Allahumma labbaik, that Allah, I'm here before you. I'm here, I present myself before you. I will attach myself to this door. I have no other door to go to. And when he said this, then the voice came from above that we have accepted your labbaik and all your previous hajj. We have also accepted those hajj as well. Anna Allah yubashiruka bi Yahya, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you the good news of having, that He will give you a son whose name will be Yahya alayhi salam. Now Allah ta'ala next mentions a few attributes of Sayyidina Yahya alayhi salam, that what type of a Nabi would Sayyidina Yahya alayhi salam be? Musaddiqam bi kalimatim min Allah. Actually, even before here, this is again the barakah of Sayyidina Maryam alayhi salam and her ibadah that she is doing. The Mufassirin have written that she was responsible for the birth of two Nabi of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And her story has so much became there were two Anbiya alayhi salatu wasalam who were born because of the barakah of this event that happened in her life. Number one was Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam, whose story inshallah will be coming next time. And then the second Nabi of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Sayyidina Yahya alayhi salam, here mentioned in this ayat. That because of her event, that she is worshipping Allah, and because of that worship, she is receiving these fruits which are out of season. And then Sayyidina Zakaria alayhi salam looks at her, and then he makes dua to Allah, and then that dua is accepted. We have the birth of Sayyidina Yahya alayhi salam. So this is the barakah of a woman. A barakah of a woman, that giving birth to Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam and becoming responsible for the birth of Sayyidina Yahya alayhi salatu wassalam. So Sayyidina Yahya alayhi salam, musaddiqam bi kalimatin min Allah. He will be confirming a word from Allah, a kalima from Allah. Kalima literally means kalima, a word. And this kalima here is an ishara to Sayyidina Isa alayhi salatu wassalam. Because Sayyidina Isa alayhi salatu wassalam, he was created, he is called a word, a kalimatullah, because he was created by this divine word of Allah, kun. Allah Ta'ala said, kun fayakun, be and it became. He was created without a father through this word of Allah, the divine word which is kun. And because of that nisbat, sometimes Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam is also referred to as kalimatullah, meaning that he was created not by the normal method of a father and a mother, rather simply by this kalima kun, be, and it became. So Sayyidina Yahya alayhi salam will be confirming. Confirming here means will be supporting, is going to assist Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam. So this is very much like a relationship between Sayyidina Harun alayhi salam assisting and supporting his brother, Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam. So now you have another relationship here of an uncle and a nephew. Or rather here this would be like cousins, right? Both of Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam and Sayyidina Yahya alayhi salam, cousins of each other. And Sayyidina Yahya alayhi salam will be supporting Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam. Number one, was Sayyidan. He will be a Sayyid. Yani he will be a leader. That people will follow him. Right? This is a word why many times we also use the word Sayyid for Anbiya alayhi salam as well. Like you say, Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. That Allah send durood and salawat on my Sayyid, yani on my leader, on my Prophet, Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So the word Sayyid literally means that leader who is to be followed, right? Wa Sayyidan wa Hasuran. Hasuran means someone, literally it means you'll be to abstain from women, or to have this chastity. A broader general meaning is to have this attribute of chastity despite having desire, to be chaste, bahaya, wa hasuran wa nabiyyam min as-salihin, and he will be a prophet from among the righteous ones. So he will be, this is a huge glad tiding that Sayyidina Yahya alayhi salam, he will be, it's mentioned that he did not commit any even minor sin, no wrong action, nor was he ever suspected of doing so. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed him with all of these qualities and all of these ezazat. So Sayyidina Zakaria alayhi salam, again, this shows to us that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepts a dua and gives something to us, then the usul and the principle of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that Allah ta'ala always gives us more than what we ask from him. This is very beautiful. Allah ta'ala always gives us more than what we can ask from him. Sayyidina Maryam alayhi salam, she is doing ibadat of Allah. Allah ta'ala is giving her things that she could never even dream of. Fruits which are out of season. Sayyidina Zakaria alayhi salam made dua, Rabbi habli min ladunka zurriyatan tayyiba. That Allah, I ask you that you grant me a pure child. A zurriyatan tayyiba, not a nabi. There was no dua that Allah grant me a nabi. Simply a zurriyatan tayyiba, a pure, a neek child, a pious child. But when Allah Ta'ala accepted that dua, usul is that Allah Ta'ala accepts according to his own shan. And Allah Ta'ala blessed Sayyidina Zakaria alayhi salam with Sayyidina Yahya alayhi salam, with a beautiful nabi, with a saleh, a nabi, a chaste, a bahaya, a sayyid, a leader. Allahu Akbar kabira, such a son. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, once he made dua that, Ya Allah, grant me a maut of shahada and grant me a maut, a dafan fi balad habibik, in the city of your beloved. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepted this dua. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu shahadat. Now shahadat, technically speaking, you could attain shahada on anywhere in the world, on the battlefield. But Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he was given shahada when he was in Masjid al-Nabi, on Mimbar Rasul, in Halat Salah. Allahu Akbar kabira. Ajib shahada. And the second part of that dua, that Allah, I ask you that you allow me to be buried in the city of your beloved Nabi alayhi salam. Now if Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala was buried in Jannatul Baqi, the dua would have been accepted. But Allah Ta'ala accepts dua according to his own shan. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose that hujra of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to be the final resting place of Sayyidina Umar radiyallahu ta'ala an, at the blessed feet of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this is the usul, that if a person turns to Allah ta'ala sincerely and they make dua with consistency and they have yaqeen in their dua, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give them, and give them much more than what they're asking. بغير hisab. So now when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave this good news, so Sayyidina Zakaria alayhi salam, he responds and he asks Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that qala rabbi anna yakunu li ghulamun, that how will I have a boy? Now this is not that Sayyidina Zakaria alayhi salam was amazed that it's not possible for me to have a boy. This is asking about the kayfiyat. This is asking that what is the kayfiyat? What is the manner in which I will have a boy? Yani, is it that me and my wife will become young once again and then we will have a boy, or will we have a boy in this old age? So what's the nature, what's the kayfiyat in which I will have a son? وَقَدْ بَلَغَنِيَ الْكِبَرُ, yani when I've reached old age, وَامْرَأَتِي آقِرْ, and my wife is barren. And he asking that how in this old age will I have a boy and my wife, she's infertile. Now what happened here, and this is unfortunate, that there is a person, some people who are just Quran only and they reject any hadith and the authority of hadith. One such person is by the name of Mr. Javed Ghamdi, and in one of his tafseers he writes, and I'll just highlight this one thing, that when you write about a Nabi, when you talk about the Anbiya alayhi salatu wassalam, you need to have a very proper respect and adab when you speak about the Anbiya alayhi salatu wassalam. So for anyone to suggest that Sayyidina Zakaria alayhi salam fell into shak about Allah, or he started to doubt Allah Ta'ala, that how can I have a child? Is it possible that, does Allah, na'uzubillah, have the qudrat to give me a child? To begin to doubt the qudrat of Allah, this is something which is inconceivable for a Nabi. So ma'azallah, may Allah Ta'ala save us from even thinking in such a way, let alone writing about such a thing. This is not possible. Or to even think that a Nabi can receive revelation and then they can doubt that revelation, doubt that maybe this is not coming from Allah, this is just shaitan whispering to me. So these are things which are inconceivable for us to think about and attribute them to a Nabi of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For a Nabi to doubt whether what comes to them is wahi or not. And if you allow for such things to happen, then the atheists, they can have a field day with you. That what type of a deen are you on, where even a Nabi can doubt their revelation, where a Nabi can have shaky, be doubtful about their iman, where a Nabi can be in shak and shubhat about what they're receiving, whether it's revelation or not. And the atheists can just say, look at you. Look, according to your own prophets, you don't even know whether what they're getting is revelation from God or is it whispering from shaitan. Sayyidina Zakaria alayhi salam, he was not doubting the qudrat and the power of Allah. He was simply asking that Allah, I completely surely understand that I'm going to get Sayyidina Yahya alayhi salam, but what is the kayfiyat in which I'm going to get that? Right? So is it, like I said, is it going to be the case that I'm going to go back to my youth and then I will have a child? Or will I have this child in my old age while I'm barren? In this old age, my wife, she is barren, she's infertile. She's asking about this kayfiyat. So then the angel replies, Qala kadhalika 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 Allahu يَفْعَلُ مَا يَشَاءُ. That such is the case, such is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He does whatever He wills. That it will be so. That كَذَلِكَ, that this command will be so. Allah Ta'ala will create a son from the two of you. This has been decreed. Don't worry, this will happen. This is taqdeer. And then Allahu yaf'alu ma yasha. Allah Ta'ala does whatever He wills. Nothing is beyond the power of Allah. This is again the demonstration of the immense power of Allah. Yarzuqu man yasha bighayri hisab. So when the angel said this, so Sayyidina Zakaria alayhi salam, he asked that Qala Rabbi ja'alli ayah, that oh my Lord, oh my Rabb, make for me a sign, yani appoint a sign of my wife's pregnancy. So here again some people say this is not shak or doubt, right? He is asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala simply and right, that you are the giver, and I'm asking you that give me some sign that my wife, she's expecting, that this conception has taken place, that she's pregnant. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, gives that sign, that qala ayatuka, that your sign is that Allah tukalliman nasa thalathata ayyamin illa ramza. Your sign is that you will not be able to speak to the people for 3 days except by gesture. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that your sign is that let 3 days pass, and you should spend those 3 days, those 3 passing days, you won't be able to speak to people. You won't be able to speak, you will not be able to speak to people for 3 days and 3 nights. And what you will only be able to do is just gesture, just ishara. And when you're in that state, وَذْكُرْ رَبَّكَ كَثِيرًا, again, وَذْكُرْ, that remember your Rabb, كَثِيرًا, abundantly. وَسَبِّحْ بِالْعَشِيِّ وَالْإِبْكَارِ, and exalt and praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala بِالْعَشِيِّ, in the evening, وَالْإِبْكَارِ, and early morning. Yani pray to Allah, glorify Allah, do tasbih of Allah at the beginning of the day, which is the Fajr time, and at the end of the day, which is the time between Asr and Maghrib. So what are you supposed to do in those 3 days? You should do a lot of zikr, and you should glorify, you should declare the glory of Allah, and you should be doing the zikr and tasbih of Allah 2 times, in the morning and in the evening. So this again is the lesson, how a person should be in a state of zikr. And it's also when a person receives a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we should increase our zikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala so that there is more barakah in that blessing. And we should also do tasbih of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, do hamd of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because the usul is that when you praise and glorify Allah ta'ala, do ta'arif of Allah, do shukr of Allah, be grateful to Allah, then Allah ta'ala will increase and further His blessings upon you, and Allah ta'ala will add more barakah in the blessings that you already have. In Quran, Allah mentions this principle, la in shakartum la azidannakum, that if you're grateful to me for my blessings, then surely I will increase my blessings upon you. So anytime a person receives any blessings from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, one should do shukr of Allah, and one should never be heedless of Allah. Normally what happens is that when you don't when you're not getting what you want, maybe you want some money, or you want a child in this case, or you want some any other thing in the dunya. So when you don't have that nemat, you are attached to Allah, you are doing ruju ila Allah, you're praying tahajjud, you're making dua, you're waking up in the middle of the night to make dua, you're doing dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as well, you're asking other people to make dua on your behalf, you go for Hajj and Umrah and you're making special duas there in Multazim and in Khane Kaaba, and then you're spending in charity and you're also making dua to Allah that Allah, please grant me a child, please grant me this, please fulfill my wish. So therefore, all of us, we're making so much dua, we're attached so much to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then when we get what we're asking for, so for example, when Allah ta'ala blesses us with a child, and then in that blessing, many times it happens that a person becomes forgetful of Allah. They lose that taluk with Allah, they lose that ibadat, they lose that dua, they lose that zikr, because they get what they want, they get what they wanted, they got what they wanted. So now a person becomes a bit lazy about their salah, they become lackadaisical about their dua, and that taluk becomes weak, it dampens. So in order to avoid that, this is the talim of our deen, that it shouldn't be the case. Rather, we should continue to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not become heedless of Allah, not become ghafil of Allah. Rather, we should do shukr of Allah. And this is again human temperament, that when a person is going through a difficulty or trial, then naturally we feel inclined to think about Allah ta'ala more and more. But then when everything is going fine according to the plan, we have all the comforts and all the blessings, then person normally they become ghafil. The Sahaba Ikram, they used to say that when we were tested with the trials and tribulations and hardships, and this was a test of sabr, then we felt that we were able to whatever extent, we found this test to be bearable. We were able to exercise patience in times of difficulty. But when we were tested with times of happiness and comfort and wealth, that was a time when we felt that we weren't able to live up to that test. We weren't able to live up to that test in the same way in which we were able to live up to the test of difficulty. And what that means is that when everything is going according to the plan, when you have all the blessings, then it's very easy for a person to become heedless of Allah. Because the test in that case, the correct answer is to do shukr. And sometimes it becomes difficult, right? To do shukr of Allah, the person becomes distracted. So we should remember this teaching, that all of us, we are tested by Allah Ta'ala in whatever halat we are. If we are going through a difficult phase in our life, that's a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The correct way to pass that test is to have sabr and patience. Not to complain, not to do shikwa, shikayat to other people. Rather, we should, like here in this example, that you turn to Allah Ta'ala in dua, like Sayyidina Zakaria alayhi salam. You make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you continue to make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you ask for afiyat, you ask for well-being, you present your weakness to Allah Ta'ala, and elsewhere this is coming, right? That how with humility Sayyidina Zakaria alayhi salam, he made dua, presented his weakness, that Allah, and we should also present our weaknesses, that Allah, we are not able to bear this burden. Allah, don't task us with something which we're not able to do. Allah, we are weak, and Allah, we ask you that you grant us with khair and afiyah, and you remove this difficulty from our life, this hardship that we are facing. So we should have sabr, and we should turn to Allah Ta'ala in dua in such times. And when things are going according to our plan, when we have that comfort and happiness and joy and all these ni'mat, when you're enjoying life, that's also an imtihan. We should never forget this. That's also a test from Allah Ta'ala, and Allah Ta'ala wishes to see whether we will turn to Allah Ta'ala and express our gratitude to Him or not. So the correct way to respond when you have the ni'mat from Allah is to be grateful to Allah Ta'ala for those blessings, to express our gratitude. And remember, there are three ways to express our shukr to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One of them is tongue, the tongue, the heart, and through our limbs. In our heart, we should have this kayfiyat of shukr, that Allah, I'm grateful to you from the core of my heart. If I were to do sajda my whole life in order to thank you for this blessing, Allah would never be able to do shukr. I would never be able to fulfill the haqq of the haqq that this ni'mat has. That Allah, you blessed me with a child. For all those people, Allah, who don't have a child, Allah, you gave me this ni'mat. Allah, I thank you. I'm eternally grateful to you for this ni'mat. And Allah, I thank you from the bottom of my heart, from the depth of my being. So, heart. Number two, through our tongue. Our tongue should also, we should express these words Allah Ta'ala likes to hear, that we're expressing in our dua, or we're doing tarif of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are praising Allah Ta'ala before other people, that Allah Ta'ala did this incredible ihsan upon me, that I'm so pleased with my Allah Ta'ala. I'm so happy with Allah that Allah has kept me in such a beautiful way. Allah Ta'ala has given me this beautiful ni'mat, this ni'mat of Allah, that I cannot thank Allah Ta'ala enough for giving me this ni'mat, and I'm truly eternally happy and pleased with Allah Ta'ala. Yani, not just rukha sukha shukar, that alhamdulillah, but to be elaborate and expansive, and to praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that the other person begins to think that waki, truly, look at this person has so much muhabbat for Allah, that just by the words that he's uttering and the words of dua that he's making and these words of praise that he's uttering, we can feel, we can experience, we can sense the muhabbat that he has for Allah. And इस तरीके से we should do तारीफ of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that मजा आ जाए. And then the third way is through our limbs, that we use our limbs in ways that Allah Ta'ala wants us, that we make ourselves pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that we don't use our eyes in a way that is displeasing to Allah. We safeguard our gaze, we safeguard our tongue, our hands, our feet, all the different limbs that we have. We use them in a way that is according to the Sharia, according to the way of our deen, in a way that pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So there are three ways in which we can express our shukr to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We make dua to Allah that may Allah ta'ala enable us to follow these teachings of our deen, to inculcate these attributes, these praiseworthy attributes in our life. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us the tawfiq that we can learn from these lessons of the Quran, these stories that are there, these lessons of the stories that are there in the Quran, that we can learn them, we can internalize these lessons, and then we can implement these teachings of hidayah in our life, and we can make ourselves pleasing in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Inshallah, we'll end here, and then next time we will have the story of the birth of Sayyidina Maryam alayhi salam. The birth of Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam, and also the fazilat of Sayyidina Maryam alayhi salam. So inshallah, we're going to do that part of the story next time. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. If there are any questions that anyone wants to ask, they can type them in the chat window. Does this mean that a child's supplication is more likely to be qabul? This is a good habit that we should try to ask our children to make dua. And because they're innocent, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will look upon their duas with rahmah, and their duas can also be readily accepted. Sayyidina Ali radiallahu ta'ala an, it was his practice on the day of on Friday between Asr and Maghrib, he would gather his family, Sayyidina Fatima Zahra radiallahu ta'ala anha, and his two sons, Sayyidina Hasan and Sayyidina Hussein radiallahu ta'ala anhuma, As a family, as a collective unit, they would make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this was also the amal of the Sahaba, and we should also try to inculcate this practice within our own homes as well. Alright, so Munir, you asked this question about abstaining from women. This word is, so I translated this hasuran. Hasuran, some people they translate this as one who abstains from women, as someone who doesn't marry. But the correct meaning, however, is that one who is zabitun nafs, was able to control the desires of his nafs. And this is the correct meaning that Sayyidina Yahya alayhi salatu wasalam was blessed with this sifat, that he was zabitun nafs, that despite having that desire, he was able to uh, he was able to do zabt, control that desire. And this is a sifat, this is a praiseworthy attribute, that someone who has this desire, inborn desire, fitri desire, they're able to control that desire for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and use it in a way that is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because as far as marriage is concerned, so we know that marriage is sunnah, and the Prophet has mentioned many fazail of nikah, that an nikahu min sunnati, that nikah is from my sunnat, and فَمَنْ رَغِبَ عَنْ سُنَّتِي فَلَيْسَ مِنِّي, that whoever turns away from my sunnah, that he is not from me. Similarly, in another hadith in Sahih Bukhari Sharif, the Prophet he said that, Ya, O youths, Ya Mashar, uh, O young men, addressing the young men, that whosoever of you possesses the means to marry, then you should get married. You should get married, you should marry, for this is a medium of lowering the gaze, and it's a means of controlling their desire, and it's a way to protect your chastity. So we understand that nikah is a way to protect your chastity, to control your gaze, and for this reason, the Prophet encouraged that one should get married. So there is no contradiction here, right? A person, Sayyidina Yahya alayhi salatu wassalam, he was blessed with the sifat of husur, that he was zabitun nafs, and he had this control over his desires, and he would not even go near any sin. He would not go even near anything which is unbecoming of a person. And this was the ta'rif, the way in which Allah Ta'ala is praising Sayyidina Yahya alayhi salatu wassalam. Can we make du'as for righteous and pious children even before we are married? Yes. In fact, if a person reflects on their salah, there is a particular dua that we make at the end of our salah. Rabbi ja'alni muqima salati, Rabbi ja'alni muqima salati wa min zurriyati. So there we are actually making dua for our children, for our offsprings. That Allah, Rabbi ja'alni muqimas salati, that make this salah for me, qaim daim upon this salah for myself, wa zurriyati, and for my children. So our children, they're not even born yet. Imagine, this is actually teaches you the importance of salah. That salah is so important in our deen that a 13-year-old child who has just attained puberty, just become morally responsible, has become muqallaf for the first time in his life. He's just 13 years old and he's making salah. And the dua that he's making in salah is that, oh Allah, grant me this istiqamat, make me established on the salah, and make my offsprings, my child, and my children to come, make them also well established on salah. He's just 13 years old. And this is teaching the incredible, the remarkable importance of salah. That a child, he's making dua for his offsprings, and the dua is about salah. So, uh, yes, the answer is that we should be making dua. And in fact, the Quran and the salah itself, the words that we utter in our salah, they're also teaching us that we should be making dua for our children, even if we are unmarried, even if we don't have children. Are wazifas acceptable in Islam? You can use Quranic wazifas or wazifas which are mentioned in the Sunnah. They're not bid'ah. So this is a dua that for people who are married and they want to, uh, they want to be blessed with a child. So this is a dua that we can use as a wazifa. Rabbi habli min ladunka zurriyatan tayyiba innaka sami'ud du'a. To recite this multiple times every day, 7 times after every salah. Similarly, for those who are unmarried, there's also another ayat of the Quran. Rabbana hablana min Rabbana hablana Rabbana hablana min azwajina wa zurriyatina qurrata a'yun waj'alna lil muttaqina imama. The Shaykh, they mention that whoever recites this dua after, in every salah, before saying salam, you recite the tashahhud and then durood sharif and then this dua, Rabbi ja'ali muqimas salati. After reciting Rabbi ja'ali muqimas salati, then if you recite this particular dua, Quranic dua, Rabbana hablana min azwajina wa zurriyatina qurrata a'yun, that, oh Allah, make for me, my spouse and my children, the coolness of my eyes, waj'alna lil muttaqina imama, and make me the leader of the muttaqin, of the righteous. And then they say their salam. So to make this a habit for every salah that we pray, whether it's fard, sunnat or nafil. So inshallah, because of the barakah of this dua, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make it easy for that person. If they're unmarried, Allah ta'ala will make the process of marriage easy for them. For those who are married and they wish for a pious child, Allah ta'ala will make that also easy for them, inshallah. How to convince children to stay away from games and all that stuff that they're doing. We have to work upon them, and this is maybe some other one of our lectures that we have on Wednesday. We can mention more about this, but the basic principle is to counsel them with love and to give them alternatives. Part of love, part of tarbiyat based on love is to give them alternatives. When you tell them to stay away from games, you sort of give them other productive activities which they can be part of. So that's one thing that person can try. And the other is to try to explain to them, if they are understanding, they can understand, again, to explain them the reason. Don't just say that don't do this, right? This is again a mizaj that you will see in the Quran as well, that it it's teaching us that when you have your kids or when you have to assign some tasks to someone, don't just say that do this or don't do this. You should also, part of love, part of compassion is to explain the reason as well, and explain that reason in such a way that it's in your benefit. That if you do what we are telling you to do, then this is the benefit that you will get. This is the faida. And you will be able to save yourself from this loss, this nuqsan. So help them convince themselves, as opposed to enforcing anything upon them. Help them convince their own selves. And you do that by love, by hikmat, by explaining, by empathizing, and also by making dua for them, right? Yes, so we did this last time, that mu'jiza happen only with Anbiya alayhi salam, and what happens with the non-prophets are karamat, not mu'jiza. How to find a mentor? The good people only back to it. Oh, continue to make dua, but at the same time, talab. The principle of our deen is that the more talab, the more desire a person shows, then man talaba faqad wajada. There's an Arabic saying that whoever has this desire and they're true in that desire and they express their desire and they keep expressing their desire, man talab, then faqad wajada, then they will be able to attain their desire. So a person should have that talab. They should make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and when they find someone who is suitable, they understand that they might be able to benefit from their company and their mentorship. So then to reach out to them and to explain and to ask that I want to be guided and I would be appreciated if you can help me on this path and guide me in coming close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's essential that a person, they start this journey with sincerity, that they're doing this for the sake of Allah, and they have this talab in their heart. And number three, khashiyat also. Whoever has these three qualities, talab and khashiyat and sincerity, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will allow them to benefit, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will also make arrangement for them to get what they want, inshallah. Like they say, that sincerity is a sword through which a person can attain whatever they want to. The Sahaba Ikram used to come to the Prophet with talab, and because of that talab, they were able to attain that maqam of sahabiyat, that greatest maqam any person can attain because of that talab. They searched out for their mentors, either Sayyidina Salman Farsi radiallahu ta'ala an. He was in Faris, in Persia, and his talab, his story of talab is amazing. A long story, that he left his own hometown, his own family, went to another place, another place, another place, and was sold as a slave, then another slave, and then finally he came to the Prophet ﷺ, and then took the Prophet ﷺ as his mentor, as his teacher. So that when a person has talab, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives them, they can achieve their destination. On the other hand, we also have cases like Abu Lahab and Abu Jahl, who were with the Prophet ﷺ in the same city. They saw the Prophet ﷺ with their own eyes. They were brought up in that environment, had 24 hours access to the Prophet ﷺ. You're asking here about many students, right? Access, I think, right? Abu Lahab, Abu Talib, Abu Jahl, they all had 24/7 access to the Prophet ﷺ. But they did not have talab, they did not have desire. And that's why, despite being so near, they were so far away. For those who only take Quran and reject Hadith, is all of their tafseer work of Deen Bayans considered not rightly guided and should be avoided, even if apparently there is nothing contradictory in their speech in a particular setting. So there are two or three things. If if what they're saying is right, then it is right, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that whatever they're saying is wrong. And like in every person, there is good, there is bad. So they might say something which is correct. And when they say something which is correct, then what they're saying is right, right? On the other hand, for a layman to be able to distinguish between what they're saying, whether it's right or wrong, that might be difficult. A person of knowledge might be able to discern and differentiate that this part is right and this part is wrong, and they can take the right and they can save themselves from the wrong. But a layman who doesn't have that background or footing in Islam, if they listen or read such works, then there is a danger that they might mix and they might become confused and they might take something which is not right and they might view that to be right. So for a layman, then it's better to avoid it. For hifz, there are certain du'as that a person, that the child himself should recite and the parents can also recite. Alam Nashrah, Surah Alam Nashrah Laka Sadrak. One should have a wird of reciting this surah every day, 7 times or 11 times or 21 times, and especially before reading and reciting, doing tilawat of the Quran. Similarly, another amal which not many people talk about, but it's very important, and I'm not sure if this is coming from which part of the world you're living in, but in to ensure that whatever we feed our kids is halal and tayyib. We have seen that those parents who feed their kids halal and tayyib food, they their kids are able to memorize Quran very easily. And on the other hand, those parents who feed their kids either haram or doubtful, any haram income, food from haram income, or doubtful income, and the food itself is also doubtful or haram, then because of the zulmat of that food, we see that it becomes difficult for the child to memorize Quran. There is a rabt, there is a connection between what you eat and 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 the amal that you do, and even the hifz, the ability to memorize the Quran, because Quran is nur, and when there is zulmat in the heart, then Quran, the nur of Quran will be, it's difficult for that nur to penetrate the heart, to come into the heart, to stay inside that heart. So, to ensure that we feed our kids halal tayyib, and in a similar way, to abstain from sin, to try to abstain from as many sins as we can, because sins are also masiyat. Once Imam Shafi rahmatullah, he complained to his teacher about his memory. Said, I learn, but I forget. So his teacher said to him that memory is linked with sins. The more a person leaves sins, the more sharper the sharper the memory will become. So if you want to increase in your memory, your hafiza, then for that you need to make tawbah of sins, and you need to abstain from sins as much as possible. Alright, we will end our class. Inshallah, we'll have the Arabic class for the Arabic students. We'll take a short break for about 5 or 6 minutes, and then after that we will resume, inshallah. We have the talk on Zilhijjah tomorrow, inshallah. So we ask all of you that you also keep us in your du'as in these blessed days and nights. And inshallah, all of you are in our du'as, and inshallah, we will be making du'as for all of you as well. And we request the same from all of you for us as well. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.